morning from Vietnam. Good afternoon to you, Sharon. Thanks a lot for spending your beautiful afternoon joining our Insight Sharing program and share your wisdom and your insight to our audience. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, we want to say thank you to you.
Wonderful to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
And Sharon, since you haven't been to our country, so please accept our invitation to you, to your family member, and your friends. If anyone decided to travel to this part of the world, please let us know, and we would love to take them out and show them how beautiful our people, our culture is.
Beautiful. We're pleased to do that. Thank you for that kind invitation.
Yeah, and for a little taste of Asian culture, so Sharon, it's a very honor for us to have you to share a little bit about who you are and the works you are doing at the moment. And so our audience will know a little bit about you. And would you please do that for us?
Please do. My name is Sharon Summerfield. I'm a well-being coach and a holistic nutritionist, and also a certified smart growth advisor. And I am passionate about helping leaders invest in their well-being with a holistic lens to prevent burnout. And so this is something I'm very passionate about. And prior to launching my business, I actually worked as an executive assistant, working across the sectors. And so my lens on our professional lives is a little bit different because I have been involved in work in different cultures. And I feel very passionate about moving away from the facade of work-life balance and finding those ways to harmonize life. So after I completed a program at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, I launched my business, and to help everyone make some shifts, because I think right now we're struggling in a lot of ways, or many people are struggling with burnout. And so I launched the Nourished Executive, went to work with a friend at the Canadian Cancer Society, and started coaching some of the leaders in the organization to do priority setting, get in alignment with their values, so they could get closer to their true priorities. And wasn't working any crazy overtime for the first time in a very long time. And then I fell off my husband's motorcycle and injured my right side. That was 6.5 years ago, and that injury still plagues me. I call that Project Me. The physio I first worked with, Clara, I call her the project director of Project Me, and I built a team. So my team, I worked with Clara for 4 years, and then she was in an accident. I had a second accident, and I had to move. We'd moved to another island, and so then moved everything to Vancouver Island. So I work with a physio, rehab Pilates, acupuncture, and we've now added lymphatic drainage physio to the mix.
Wow. So how everything with the injury now?
I look forward to the day I can go for a walk along the beach in the summer where my hand doesn't swell. So with as you and your wife have discovered with the many conversations that you have had, there's many gifts in disruption. And, you know, with the physio, with Clara, who I worked with, she encouraged me to take a recipe, make it more nutrient dense, and then type it up, because I had to I had to relearn to do everything. And so that created an opportunity for me to create a collection of gluten-free and plant-based recipes. My nephew showed me how to use an auto command on my phone so I could take photos. I turned those into cards, which became a writing exercise. So I would use those to send notes of gratitude to people I appreciated, send Christmas cards and birthday cards. And then it also opened another window to talk to people like you, be on webinars, start to write more. I'm learning now how to use a voice-to-text tool. It makes me crazy because it's when you know how to type, it's really challenging. But it's like I've learned that I can only do things in short bursts. Like I can't sit down and do an entire day of computer work. Like I can't go to physio or like Mondays I do Pilates. I can't do Pilates and then come and spend the rest of the afternoon on the computer. I need to take a break. I need to rest. It honestly started with one conversation at a time. My physio in Vancouver, Clara, is an incredible human being. And so, I mean, I didn't drive for 6 months. In the first 6 months of the injury, I would have exercises like I'm going to wear a pair of jeans with a zipper in them once a week. I'm going to figure out how I can chop a cucumber. So it was all these small little things. And so Claire and I would have these conversations, and it's like, okay, we've been doing physio. I want to get back to Pilates. No, Sharon, you have to be able to drive first. So Clara was really, really good about helping to break it down in bite-sized chunks and using tools within the home as part of the rehab. And so a year after the injury, we actually moved to an island. And I had been doing Pilates with Susan at a Pilates studio, because there's a big difference between Pilates in a studio and Pilates in a rec center. From the level of training, the equipment, there's so many different pieces to it. And, started when we moved to the island. I was still going back to Vancouver every 2 weeks for my treatments. And Susan was trying to help me find someone on the island. And I couldn't find anybody. I tried a few different people and it just wasn't working. And she said, look, we've been working together long enough. Let's set you up at home with more tools. And she said, you've got all these other things. I had my physio roller ball, I had bands, and I had small weights, and I had round weights. And so we just added a couple of things. And so that was around the time that COVID actually hit. So my transition to continuing to invest in my well-being was enhanced because I could now do Pilates via Zoom. At that point, I didn't have a reformer at home. And I could do physio at home because, I had all the balls and the bands. And so it was, what can I do today? It was really learning to celebrate, what can I do today? And I actually started tracking. I did that for, I want to say, about the first year. I would track what I could do and what I couldn't do. One of her suggestions was to take a recipe, make it more nutrient dense, but also do typing tests because I was trying to get strength back in my hand. And I started typing when I was 15 in typing class. So this wasn't anything new, but I had to learn to do it again. So I was invited to the Christmas lunch for the Canadian Cancer Society. And the then director of HR said to me, she said, Sharon, you're reading a lot. So at that point, I was probably reading 1 to 2 leadership management books a week. And she said, why don't you start typing up book reviews? And so that's actually what I did. So then I started going one step further. I learned how to use the voice activation to take photos. So the quotes I liked in the books, I would then put those into PowerPoint and then add the quote I liked and then turn it into a JPEG or another slide for a presentation that I could do at presentations I was invited to or events I was at. So I started finding those ways. I don't do anything once. Like I just finished reading Jennifer Moss's book, Why Are We Here? Jennifer Moss is a Canadian author, very talented lady, really talking about the shifts that we need in our world of work. And I loved her book. Actually, I couldn't put it down. And I've got a review on my website. And I did the same thing. Took some of the photos that I liked, featuring mostly photos from BC, Canada. And then I'm going to use those in a presentation on the weekend where I'm actually talking about navigating my injury.
Early before you got the injury, you've been spending time to help people to right here to harmonizing their lives, right? To preventing burnout, and that is very important because as human beings, we all want to be happy. We all want to be healthy. We want to have a good life. But along the way, on that journey, we forgot what we wanted, or we neglected of what we wanted. So, Sharon, I want to bring you all the way back into when you were young, when you was a kid. Okay, so travel time with me to see how that transformation happened along the way for your life. How does that sound to you?
It sounds good.
All right. So when I was little, I live in a very poor community, and we have electricity one day, maybe the next day we don't. So the beautiful time for me is when we see the moon. All right. So at night, and the moon shines, and we can see things beautifully in the neighborhood. So my earliest dream was to becoming an astronaut and going to the moon or something like that to see how bright it is up there. But life did not give me an opportunity to do that. Okay, so when you were little, Sharon, what was your dream about the future works or the future you that you are going to become in the and do for others?
That's a good question. Like I can remember earlier on wanting to be a elementary school teacher, but due to the academic challenges that I had, that door was closed. So I think I actually became, as I, started working and, started off as a receptionist and then, started on my admin career, I became very stubborn because learning was never easy for me. So it was like, okay, it's going to take me a bit, but I am going to get this. So I started actually taking courses while I was working full time, and just wanted to, because I always felt, and I guess it probably comes back from growing up, this need for living our best lives where our life doesn't come at the cost of living. Like my dad worked for a tea and coffee company. Before that, he was a logger. He started logging when he was 14. And so I saw him working crazy, crazy hours. And I thought there had to be a better way. And at that point, I didn't really know that much about the idea of work-life balance. My first job, I don't think work-life balance exists. I think it's about harmonizing life. My first job was actually working at a terminal in North Vancouver, which was a 24-hour operation. And we hardly did any overtime. And what was interesting is when I left that job, it was a private company, when I left that job and we moved to the Yukon, which is in northern Canada, I took a job as a school secretary, and I was doing insane amounts of overtime. It was crazy how much overtime we were doing. And so it was like at that point, it's like, okay, there's got to be more. How can we do our best work if we're unable to show up as our best selves because we're getting pulled in all these different directions? So I think that's really where the seed started to get planted. Okay, what can we do differently? I started getting really interested in management, in leadership. How can this be different?
Mm. So it started by watching your father working, a huge amount of time, and you had the idea at the beginning that how could it be differently, right? And then through your own experience of working overtime, then the idea of work-life balance and preventing burnout. So how long ago was that?
Um, well, it's the seeds have been planted for quite a while. Like I was in the Yukon in the 90s, but where it really started to strike home for me. I was working for a municipality. I'll never forget this. I was working crazy hours, and there had been a council meeting that had ended at 2 o'clock in the morning, with the expectation of the staff being there at 8:30 the next morning. And so instead of encouraging everyone to stay home and rest, after the council meetings, there was always a meeting for staff, and I was working in the mayor's office at the time. Everyone that was there, the assistant to the city manager went out and bought Starbucks cards and handed everyone Starbucks cards to drink more coffee. And like, that was the piece that was just like, okay, this isn't working for me. And the more I started, the more, now I understand what it was, is my values were in disconnect. And so I started reading more about, they didn't call it burnout then. It was under the umbrella of bullying and toxic workplaces. So I started reading more about what does a healthy organization look like, and transition to a few roles after that. But the big role was when I was working for an engineering firm, and started looking at, there was some walk and talk problems, and I started learning more about values, and started looking at, what are my values? Like, integrity is one of my values. Harmony is one of my values. Community is one of my values. Excellence is one of my values, but not excellent at the cost of everything else. And so if we actually want to do something about burnout, we need to foster psychological safety, and we need to be creating boundaries that are in alignment with our values and purpose, so we can actually focus on our true priorities. And so the values conversation kept coming up for me. I was reading more, and I was introduced to Marcus Buckingham's work, and getting people to focus on their strengths. And then with the injury, I had all this time. There was a lot of things that I couldn't do, and there's a lot of things I still can't do, but I can read. I can listen to a podcast. So I think that's really, it is kind of like a building.
Wow, well, I wrote it here. You said the values you found is in the disconnect. So when you starting to slow down and have time for yourself to really look at the bigger picture, and then you start to see and connecting the dots, what you could do to make to amplify the impact of what you do, right? I picked one word in here in what you say is the walk and talk problems.
Yes.
Okay, because yesterday we had a leadership conversation with many leaders in the region, and one young lady brought the conversation to a different direction, and it's about walking the talk. Because a lot of leaders wants to make change, want to create something good for their organization and for the employees, but the talking, the walking is not in the same alignments. And so she challenged the leaders attending that event. And so for Sharon, share with us, why are we not walking the talk?
Well, I think some organizations get really caught in their vision statements and their mission statements, but unfortunately, they're just a poster on the wall. And if our walk and talk are not in alignment, it actually puts the organization in a place where their staff don't trust them, and their clients don't trust them. If your staff don't trust you, then that impacts how they interact with your clients. If clients don't trust you, you have a trouble winning work. And if you can't win work, you can't keep your doors open, and you can't keep your staff working. It's actually a huge fundamental piece.
And the burnout, we all, for example, like even burnout is relatively new terms that we've been actually doing lately, right? But it's not something new. It's been in the dictionary for a long time, in the management and books for a long time. Why was it ignored?
Because I think, it was I think it was the command and control culture for a really, really long time. It
Mm,
was the I'm in charge, so you shall. This idea that if someone told you to, it's the boss mentality. You
mm,
work for me. I'm in charge, so don't question. And so as our cultures have started to shift, and we've started to really look at the cost of bullying, of burnout, and the lack of psychological safety, because psychological safety is the competitive advantage. So
yes.
when organizations actually started to look at the cost of that, they started to think about, okay, we can do something different. And there were teams that started to do something different, and they were performing so much better. So
Mm,
I think it's the shift. There's a friend of mine. He was working in doing a lot of work in psychological safety in Australia. Now he's moved back to Canada. But what he was doing was he was starting conversations with CEOs and executives and leaders in looking at how the steps they could take to foster greater psychological safety in their workplaces. And they started to see an increase in their net revenue. So
mm,
when you're actually fostering psychological safety within your teams and within your organizations, your staff are more respectful with each other. So then if your staff are more respectful with each other, they're going to be more respectful with your client. So then it's easier for everyone to actually work together because the expectations are actually they're laid out for people on this is how we work together.
so what I understand is burnout is a part of a culture and is a result. If preventing burnout is the result from a good culture where psychological safety is umbrella and is part of that culture. Am I correct?
So burnout's happening because people do not have the space
Ah,
to have time to rest, to take that time. Like it's one thing to have all these exciting projects to be part of, but part of delivering these big projects is the ability to create space to rest, to create that space for downtime.
mm. So if leaders want to prevent burnouts for organizations, right? What are the baby steps or what is a sign that they need to look at to observe to make sure that okay, if we keep doing this way, then maybe leading to the employees burned out and they need to have intervention in between. What can they do to have to make it not to happen, Sharon?
I think they need to be. I think within organizations, managers need to be having regular one-on-ones with their staff. They need to
Mm,
find out what is happening for their people at work, and are there things at home? Maybe they've got aging parents, or maybe they've got a child that's been diagnosed with an illness. Because we're not just going to work. And for the longest time, it was keep your head down. It's only about work. We don't want to know what's going outside your life, outside these four walls, so to speak. But now we know there's tons of research. What's happening outside the organization impacts what's happening inside the organization. And also, what's happening inside the organization impacts our ability to thrive outside the organization. So, simple steps that the organization leaders can do, the one on ones, looking at individualized growth plans, investing in learning and development for all staff, also creating a different conversation around scheduling and taking downtime, and that needs to be modeled by the leaders.
mm,
And I think we need to stop celebrating people that are working crazy, crazy hours. Sometimes there's deadlines for clients that need to be met. So, but the expectation that's after someone's done that, they're just going to go back to work and still, do their regular 8 to 6 or how many hours that may look like. But fostering that conversation of, okay, you've been working these extra long hours. How about you take another 3 or 4 days off?
Wow.
Like
Sharon, but yeah.
infusing well-being in every aspect of your organization and how you come together, how you do the work.
Mm. It seems to me that the system at the moment for organizations design is not helping leaders and managers to accomplish that. For example, we have the notion of do more with less, right? And that notion of do more with less is more revenue, more market share, more return on investments, but with less resources at hand. So costs is cutting, but people are cutting, results are cutting, but then companies are expecting to delivering more. So if you look at that desire and the desire for well-being for the employees seems to be not in pair together. So, in your professional idea, how can we deal with that dilemma?
Are we focusing on the right things?
Mm.
Like if we are going to do more with less, what does that more mean? That's why I think the values exercise and looking at first your values and then looking at where you're spending your time, are those actually your true priorities? So if we're going to do more with less, are those the right things to be doing? Are those your true priorities? And can you foster excellence in doing that?
So, in your opinion, what is the right things? What are the right things that an organization should be aiming for?
Well, I think there needs to be greater flexibility.
Mm.
Right now, there's more people being mandated to go back to the office, but I think there's times where a hybrid model works really, really well. And this isn't something that's just come through in the last 5 years. I mean, COVID happened 5 years ago. When I was working for the engineering firm, 10, 15 years ago, we had the ability to work from home.
Mm.
And so there were systems put in place so that we could actually have that hybrid environment. And so I think Jennifer Moss talks about this in her book a lot about, there's a huge theme about flexibility based on her research. And I would agree,
Mm.
having that flexibility to and move away from, I've been saying this for quite a few years, we need to move away from this is the time you start and this is the time you end. We need to shift more to a deliverables based model. This is the scope of the work. This is the schedule. These are the deadlines. What do we need to do to set that up and set our people up for success? So
Mm.
it becomes, how do we come together? How do we meet these priorities? How do we manage this project and do this together? And it also creates a different conversation for succession planning, for learning and growth and development. So when I was working for the engineering firm, I was working as an executive assistant and I had an assistant. And I was going up north to take care of my nephews. Well, my sister and her husband went down to the Calgary Stampede. The Calgary Stampede is a huge thing in Alberta. Like, it's cowboy country at its best. And so I was in the middle of planning this event, and people from the US were coming up to Canada, and we were going to showcase a number of our really big infrastructure projects. So I had included my assistant in all these meetings. Well, we're about to make all the invitations and contact our clients to say, can you be part of this? And they moved the date. They moved the date to a day to a time period where I wasn't going to be there. I couldn't tell my sister, I can't do this, because they had made commitments. Her husband had made professional commitments. I had my assistant. I knew she could do an amazing job, which she did. But I had been mentoring her and supporting her along this journey. So when they changed the date, one of the fellows from the US said, well, what are you going to do now? I said, well, my assistant will handle it. He said, well, does she know what to do? I said, she's been involved in every single meeting all the way along. So I think we need to, in creating greater flexibility, we need to create these opportunities for learning and growth And so that we can take that downtime. So if we're thinking of, say, someone wants to take their family on a trip to Europe, we can cover for them while they're away so they can actually enjoy that time away. Because right now, people don't have the ability to disconnect, and the connectability 24/7 is impacting their well-being. So how do we set up a model so that we can actually be realistic about what's it going to take to deliver? What does this look like? How can we support our people in doing this? I worked for one organization where the Friday before a long weekend, we would get that Friday off. They would shut the entire company down for that Friday. Not every business can do that, but what are the ways you can do that within your own team?
Like you mentioned earlier, instead of focus on what we cannot do, focus on what we can do and small little thing that we can do that matters. That up to the bigger improvement, bigger change, right? So I want to know how your life has been changing and evolving with helping people to flourish and then to treasure the disconnection time, since the last 4.5 years.
The last, well, with my injury, the last 6.5 years.
6.5 years, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, it's been. So all my rehab practitioners, we always have these conversations, and how we can support each other, what kind of supports that I need. So I've always been really committed to learning and growth and investing in my own learning. And so I've had lots of different conversations, I've been involved in some coaching conversations with people who, one former colleague, she had 2 kids back to back, basically. And in Canada, mat leave is 18 months. I know it's not like that in other parts of the world, but so she was looking at how she was going to come back to work. So some of the things we've been talking about, okay, what does your ideal role look like? Do you want to travel for work? How can you work from home? And so like normalizing these sorts of conversations. And another colleague, former colleague, she was in a couple of different roles, and she was being asked to work in extreme extra hours, be available 24/7, and it's again normalizing this conversation. Does this reflect your ideal role? What is your values? What are your true priorities? Can you show up as your best self? What does that time look like that you need to rest and recover so you can show up as your best self? So like normalizing more of those conversations, but also looking at, when I'm talking to people, I always love to introduce the standout assessment by Marcus Buckingham. I've been following Marcus's work for, I want to say, about 15 years. And I find it to be such a great tool because it's simple, and people get it. There was one lady I was working with, and I used this smart growth tool, looking at the S-curve of learning. I used that with her, and as we're working through that and looking at her ecosystem, and then took a look at the strengths that were identified from the standout assessment, she realized that she was trying to do things in an environment that she didn't like. That was not one of her strengths. She was trying to create this total online business, which she hated online. She wanted to be doing more work face-to-face within her community. So by having those conversations and using some of these other tools, she could actually start making the shifts so she could show up as her best self.
Wow. So imagine if we don't have the people around us, the people like you that can have that little conversation, that can have, that can offer tools that help us to realize what else that we've been missing on the way, what else that we want, what is that we want in life. So what can we do to ourselves, to self-help and to make sure that we can have those moments checked and come to the realization of what we want, Sharon?
I think one of the most powerful things we can do is build in a ritual of reflection.
Mm.
Reflect on our day. What went well? What did I learn? What will I do differently? Start there. I think it is one of the most powerful things we can do. And I also think looking at the growth accelerants, after I read Whitney Johnson's book, Disrupt Yourself. I love Whitney Johnson. I think she's amazing. Her podcast, honestly, I discovered her work a few months after my injury, and it became like oxygen of hope. And after I read that book, Disrupt Yourself, and looking at the growth accelerants, that's how I was managing my new way forward. That's how I was learning to learn again. The idea of taking the right risks, playing to your distinctive strengths, embracing your constraints, step back to grow, be discovery driven. I think there's one more, a leverage failure. And, I think with Amy Edmondson's work and Timothy Clark's work and more work in the psychological safety space, more people are talking about the lessons we learn when things don't go as well as planned. And failure, give failure its due course. It's always an opportunity to learn, even if it's just learning, I'm not going to do that way next time. I'm going to try this. So I think those are the sorts of things. And trust your instincts. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it is. If you feel uncomfortable, or your heart is racing a little bit more when you're around certain people and around and involved in certain conversations, pay attention to that. What is your body trying to tell you?
Wow. It's interesting that you mentioned Whitney Johnson on this program. So we interviewed her back in May of last year.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we did. We had a very beautiful conversation with Whitney, and yes, she's amazing, right? And a lot of people want to disrupt themselves so that they can become in the better version, different kind of versions of that they wanted to become. And you said that it's important to disconnect, and that's important. Sounds simple. It's really hard for a lot of people, doing me included. And years ago, because we get used to the habit of the working. So staying still and disconnect seems to be like not in the nature of ourselves, right? So Sharon, teach us, how to really disconnect, how to use the time for reflection into that disconnect and disconnected time, so that we can like recharge, relax, recharge, and help ourselves to grow in different dimensions.
So I encourage everyone to turn off their notifications. Start there. I think we've forgotten that all these devices and all this access to technology is ours to manage, and instead of it managing us. So I think turning off our notifications is something incredibly powerful. Look at when you are going to access technology. Get your technology out of your bedroom. Like, it does not belong in the bedroom. I know I've had so many people tell me, well, how will I know when to wake up? I said, well, if you need an alarm, put your alarm in a room outside your bedroom. My phone is in the kitchen. And but you're actually better off to learn to pay attention to your rhythms and wake up without an alarm. That is an incredibly powerful way to invest in your well-being. But also start having conversations with your team. Okay, identify the core hours that your team needs to be available to collaborate. And and if an emergency comes up, what tool are you going to use? And what is a real emergency? We've gotten so used to being so attached and so available, we're forgetting what a true emergency is.
Ah.
And one of the things, the last infrastructure project I was on, I loved that we did this, is we would come together over food. Like when you think about it, you think about, like, when I look at when my dad was working, and when my mom was working as a nurse, they had scheduled lunch breaks, they had scheduled coffee breaks. And so they would actually take that time. My husband's a firefighter, so they all talk about enjoying meals together. And that's just part of the culture. We have been moving away from that culture. And so what are the ways that we can break bread together, as how we come together? And that's one of the things I absolutely loved about the last infrastructure project we worked on. I worked on when we were on site, closer to where the construction was happening. We actually had 2 barbecues. And so we would do these barbecue lunches, and it was great. And when we had to close down one office and then move to the office in downtown Vancouver, a few of the leaders would say at one of the meetings where everybody was there, okay, everybody, free up your lunch is coming in. And I think normalizing that time to break bread together is a beautiful way to find those ways to connect. Like, I always talk about the ways that we can use food to connect with each other.
Wow. It sounds simple, but it's when we were little, right? It's so easy for us as children to connect to one another. We are very empathetic with how the other kid. We can easily create connection. We can easily get into conversations. And along the way, when we're growing up, Sharon, I think there's somewhere in between, that journey of growing up, that something happened, and it's changed us. It's changed the children inside of each of us, the child inside of each of us, right? So what happened to that journey of growing?
I wonder if I think technology definitely has a role to play. I mean, there is a movement to get technology, having kids with no phones until they're 14 and 15 years old. There's a huge movement actually to make that happen, because it's actually rewiring brains. But when one of my sisters, this was a number of years ago, she was working as a community programmer. My sister has a degree in English and drama, and she's an actress. She does quite a few different things. She teaches ESL. She's a writer. I use her as an editor for some of my articles. But she wears many hats. She loves to garden. She was working as a community programmer in this small community on the BC-Alberta border. And it's a fairly affluent area because most of the parents actually work in the mine. And so these kids were coming to her programs, but they didn't know how to play unless it was organized play. So she was developing all these different programs for them to do. So when I grew up, I mean, we didn't even have a TV until I was in grade 6. So in the summer months, we were outside, playing kick the can. We're playing things, British Bulldogs, which no one is allowed to play anymore, and there's good reason for that. But we were playing baseball in the field. We were down in the creek. We were exploring. But we have, for many reasons, we've gotten away from a lot of that. And, having kids connect to the dirt, get their hands in gardening, and, just playing away from technology. People are now learning that we need to put parameters around when our kids are in front of a screen. Or I can't remember his name, but I attended this workshop that the McKay Forums did a while ago, and it was this speaker. He was talking about, he had a huge health scare, so he really changed how he does life. And they actually have their rotor attached to a light with a timer on it. So the rotor actually gets shut down at 11 o'clock at night. No one in the house has any access to any technology after 11 o'clock at night.
Wow. Wow.
So they've realized within their family unit that these are the changes that they need to make. So these changes will be different for each of us, but what is the change we can make today? Maybe with what you've got on your plate today, maybe you need to be on the computer, on your device till 8 o'clock at night, but then that's your stop time. And then you won't re-engage with technology until the next morning. So what does that look like?
Beautiful. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think technologies can bring great things to our life, more productive, more enjoyment, and also, like any other things, it could come with the negative side if we don't know how to use it well. And thanks for sharing the beautiful advice. In this conversation, you mentioned one word repeatedly, Sharon, is that word, I think. Okay? And my wife and I, we've been on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, because so many things that come in and take away from our ability to think. So it's been diminishing instead of increasing, right? So Sharon, the question for you, and I hope that if you answer this and our audience will be able to pick something to reflect, to learn, and to improve their ability to think through your wisdom, that would be wonderful. And we believe that's where the transformation begins. So how have you been growing your ability to think over the years?
I would say my ability to think, to get out of my head. Sometimes it's going for a walk. Sometimes it's journaling. Sometimes it's reading and taking the time to reflect on what I've learned, what I would like to share with someone else. But it really is creating that space. And I can remember there was a LinkedIn Live Whitney Johnson did during COVID, and I am a huge fan of her work. I will openly admit it. And she was talking about, how sometimes we get caught in the scrolling, we're overwhelmed, and so when we find ourselves getting caught in the scrolling, what is the activity we can use to shift us? What does that look like? And so, often when I find myself, and I find that's happening for me when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm feeling tired. So I find actually, I'm not a gifted pianist, but I can play the piano. I can only play it for short periods of time, but I find just the simple movement of getting in front of the keyboard, looking at what I can play. Sometimes I have to use the circle of fifths because I'm missing my mobility in my right hand isn't that great. But it's shifting your activity. If you find you're getting caught in something that's you're not connecting with yourself, how can you create that connection? Maybe it's walking on the grass, like just walking, getting away. And I think the technology in a lot of cases impeding our ability to think. So what is the way for each of us to connect with ourselves? Maybe that's a reflection. Maybe that is going for a walk. Maybe that is coloring. Adult coloring books, I think everyone should have. They're a beautiful thing to do. Maybe it's creating a vision board. Maybe it is listening to a podcast. Maybe I think the opportunities are endless. Maybe it's getting out your favorite cookbook and making a recipe that you're going to share with your friends, or make that recipe, invite a friend over for tea or coffee, or take it into work to share with your colleagues.
Mm. So it's the intentional process. As long as you ask the question, what can you do to improve your ability to think? Then the brain and the it will work out the magic to give you the options, the creativity and solutions to continue exploring the
Well,
possibility out there, right?
I
Yes.
think it actually goes one step further. Is
Mm.
when we're creating that space to think, asking ourselves, what do I need in this moment?
Mm.
Because I think the more we can normalize asking ourselves that question, and while we do give ourselves grace, the space will open up.
Beautiful, beautiful. Sharon, is there anything exciting you are working on and you want to share with us so that we can celebrate with you in advance?
Sure, that would be great. I'm starting to write a book. I'm
Wow.
calling it Community of Care, now Building Resilience, Navigating Injury. So it'll be all about my injury, navigating it. My hope is this book will plant seeds of the ways we can support people managing injuries, people on leave, building connection with people while they're on leave, um, hoping to create a different conversation.
Wow, Sharon, thanks for writing that book because it's important to lead by example and people would love to hear real life example of how you work the challenges and not only to recover for yourself but having people along the way to bring something great out of their the inner side, the design side of them to be to be wonderful, right? And that leading to the last question that I want to ask you for today. We picked a new project is to learn and share on the topic of wisdom. Okay, and because we know we just feel that the wisdom is not really good in transferring from one generation to the next, for one culture to the next, from one country to the next, and we want to create that movement of exchanging wisdom so that whoever listen to conversation will be able to pick something to think. That's all we want. And the question for you is simple. It's just how Sharon is defining what wisdom is.
Ooh, but wisdom to me is lessons in wisdom. I don't, I like to reframe, mistakes and failures as lessons in wisdom. And by sharing our stories, that's how we can share what we've learned along the way and the little jewels of wisdom and the seeds that we've discovered in our journey. And I think in discovering wisdom, it's through sharing our stories.
Beautiful, beautiful. And thanks for helping us to sharing the wisdom through sharing your stories and sharing your amazing intentional stories of overcoming challenges and help people to create, to know the importance of well-being, to prevent burnouts, and then to help leaders to create environment, a culture of psychology safe for everybody to harmonize the work. And I put in here is harmonizing their lives also. So thanks for doing that, Sharon.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And if I can, and I think it's also how we're building our communities of care. The more we can actually build and foster cultures and community of care, the richer our lives will be professionally and personally.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So I look forward to an opportunity to meet you in person. My daughter and my sons study in Bellingham, so not far from the BC. So the next so we come to visit them very often during the year. So the next time if we travel to Seattle, and then I would let you know in advance if we can go to the BC to see you, and that would be wonderful to put the face to the names, okay? And then to see you in
That
person.
would be lovely. Thank you
Uh,
so much for your time and thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you very much for a beautiful conversation today. Thank you. You have a wonderful evening, okay?
You as well. Enjoy your day.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye.